Hi, and welcome back to Animal Liberation TV. So, I'm still a little bit trying to get over the COVID, so my uploads have all been delayed a little bit. And I'm going away tomorrow for a week or two to be with my best mate's widow, Hannah, in Wales. So, I'm not going to be doing any uploads for a week or two, so I'll be having a little break, probably good for my mind. So today, unbelievably, shockingly for me, marks the 1 year anniversary since the death of my best mate Brench. And I did a video about him a few months after his death. And in that I said I was going to do a full podcast, and I am still planning some time of doing a podcast about him. And my plan for that is to get little films of lots of people that knew him saying a few things about him, their favourite memories of what they think of him and what he means to them and all that sort of thing. So why is it relevant for you to hear about my best mate? Well, my best mate was an animal liberationist, a hunt saboteur, a campaigner. He did a lot in the struggle for animal liberation, and Brench, which is his nickname, short for Brenchcore, which he changed by Depol, I think, when he was a punk back in the 80s or whatever. Brench was a very successful activist. This is why it's relevant to people on the channel. And the thing is, unlike some people like me or Keith or John Curtin or Ronnie Lee or Mel Broughton and a few other people, people that tend to be sort of in the limelight, quite gobby. He wasn't one of those people. He was very quiet about what he'd done and what he did. And so in that sense, no one outside of the Animal Liberation Front really knows Brench that well. But he served 2 prison sentences, and I am going to do a proper podcast about him, talking about him properly, but I'm just going to talk about him briefly for his 1 year anniversary. He got arrested at the riot outside the hunt kennels of the Cheshire Beagles, which took place on the Monday, a couple of days after Mike Hill was run over and killed by the hound trailer of the Cheshire Beagles hunt on the 9th of February 1991, which I have talked about quite a lot of times. And there's a full episode, podcast 2, the ALF response to the murder of Mike Hill, which I thoroughly recommend that everyone should watch. And Brench was arrested at the riot at the hunt kennels on that Monday. He served quite a few months for that. I'll look into all the details. John Curtin, JC, he had some statements from the police from that time that a few of us saw at Brench's funeral. So I'm hoping to dig out things like that to sort of go into a bit more detail, because it's got stuff that he said which was quite amusing when he was nicked. Not in the interview, obviously. He said no comment when he was actually arrested. Yeah. And then he was also arrested a few months later in 1991, along with his partner at the time, Rhian Thomas, who also passed away. I think that's 3 years ago now, unbelievably. And that was a devastating blow to all of us when Rhian passed away 3 years ago. And then Brench a couple of years later, last year. So a year today, that's had a big impact on what I've done this last year on the channel. I would have been a lot busier, really, but I spent a few months living over there, helping out, looking after his wife and widow now, Hannah, and helping out in the shop a bit. Because that's another legacy of Brench's, was 25 years ago, he set up an all-vegan shop called Vegonia in Porthmadog in Wales, North Wales, and it supplies lots of vegan whole foods to that peninsula in North Wales. So my son was saying the other week, Brench kind of lives on in and through his shop, which is true, some degree. But I do actually feel a little bit more, generally speaking, this last week and today in particular, obviously my head's a little bit of a mess, but I've been feeling a bit clearer this last few weeks, and I have to say that, you know, because me and Hannah were both by his bedside when he actually took his last breath, because they let him out for the last 2.5 weeks. Because all of the year before, he'd spent pretty much in and out of hospital the whole time. And in fact, he was one of the people that was in during the COVID restrictions before Christmas last year, and he was in for a few weeks on and off then. And Hannah wasn't allowed to see him, and he was just basically dying in hospital all on his own with no visitors. Outrageous, outrageous. And this is all at the time that those fucking Tory wankers were having their Christmas parties, so they put themselves right at the top of my list. I'll tell you, just right behind Tony Blair now. So people, politicians that fucked my mates over, you fucking wankers. Anyway, let's not beat on about that. So it's been a very, very hard year, and you know, for a few months I couldn't even think straight, and I think, you know, me and Brench knew each other for 30 years, and I've spent probably as much time with him as I have any other, or more than any, or many other, quite a lot of humans outside of my son and my parents. I probably spent more time with Brench than any other person, and you know, we were fellow SABs, fellow activists, fellow protesters. You know, he was active for a whole decade, despite his 2 prison sentences. That didn't deter him. I mean, Brench used to be hardcore back in the day, you know, and anyone that knows him would agree with that. You know, he was definitely a kind of halfway stage to Barry sort of thing in some ways back in the 90s. So it has taken me a long time to try and piece my head back together again, because you kind of, when someone that's been sort of just about the most important person outside of your family in your life over 30 years, watching him taking his last breath and dying the 2.5 weeks before that, and very ill for the 3 years before that with a cancers. You know, watching your best mate take his last breath, you know, I knew it was going to be a watershed moment in my life when I said, yes, I'll come and be there. I'd like to be there with him. You know, like all your hopes and dreams die. You know, all your youthful romanticizing about life, that all dies. But you have to build things back up. You know, that's what I found for myself anyway. Anyway, the point relating really to animal liberation from my angle, is that it is, you know, now I've seen the fate that awaits us all. And this is the other thing, it's like, yes, you know, I've lost my best mate, but the simple fact is that all of us are just temporary. The animals, us, everything's temporary. You know, every person that's ever lived has lost their best mate, unless they died first. You know, we're all going to lose each other. That's a simple, brutal, bizarre fact of life. You know, so this the sort of animal liberation point of this is like, what did Brench achieve? Well, a hell of a lot in his lifetime. He was behind some of the most iconic images of the Animal Liberation Front from the 90s, but no one would know that, you know. Not by his mouth anyway. And I can't grass him up for specific events because some of his co-accused are still alive and well and free and whatever, so I can't implicate them in stuff that he was associated with. But he was behind some of the most iconic images of the 90s. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to get to is, if 100 years' time from now, I mean, it's impossible to imagine what the world will look like in 100 years' time, isn't it? Probably not very good, especially with climate disaster happening and all the rest of it. But let's assume things are relatively similar to how they are now. In 100 years' time, there'll be a load of other people and a load of other animals coming and going, much more quicker, the animals, because they're just used as products, aren't they? But unless we intervene while we're alive, this shit is never going to happen. And Brench died without seeing the dream of animal liberation come true. and I'm pretty sure that's going to be the same for me when I leave. But one thing I know for sure is that while I'm here, I'm going to fight harder than ever. And seeing Brench pass away, and seeing all the dreams and our youthful dreams and our political dreams and our animal liberation dreams all die, they all died for me at the same time, and I've had to rebuild all of that back inside my own headspace. And I think that it's given me very much a renewed sense of determination. You know, I'm bouncing back from my grief. That's not to say I'm not still grieving heavily and all the rest of it. It's going to take me the rest of my life to try and get my head around Brench not being here, and how brutal life really is. But I think that's one thing we need to learn. Me and Hannah developed a phrase during the period while Brench was dying, and then afterwards for quite a few months, where we came up with a phrase of ready for combat. And because that's how we felt we were having to be, you know, we were both working at 120% emotional capacity for months. And bless her, she was an angel to him, and she's, you know, done really well for herself. But the point is that life is a struggle in itself, you know. And then on top of that, we live under patriarchal capitalism and speciesist abuse systems. You know, we've only just come out of human slavery, and there's still a lot of slavery. And in my opinion, capitalism is wage slavery. So we've got one fucking hell of a lot of struggle on top of the struggle of life itself. But you know, I was at the birth of my son, and I've been at the death of my best friend, and I can tell you life is still pretty much a fucking complete bizarre mystery to me. But what isn't a mystery is the sense of, while people are here, that we conduct ourselves in some sort of manner where we don't rape the earth and kill every living thing that isn't human or even each other while we're here. I do believe in a peaceful world, and I believe in anarchism is the root to that. And I believe that animal liberation is a fundamental moral base for that. And if anything, going through this best friend death experience has made me more determined, more focused, more resolute, and absolutely certain that the struggle for animal liberation is all important, um, because we have to stop this being the way the world works, where we just rape the planet and kill everything that lives as a product for our own profit or enjoyment, whether to eat or hunt or wear or whatever it is. It's become more apparent to me how brutal the world is and how brutal life is. And unfortunately, we can shy away from that, all of us, you know, and not engage with that. And these horrors will carry on and on and on. And in 100, 200, 500 years' time, people will still be doing this to animals. And I believe that this is the time for change. And certainly, you know, while I'm alive and breathing, and having seen the fate that becomes us all, befalls us all, that I want to be part of fighting for the hopes and dreams of animal liberation while I am here. I'm pretty sure that that is how I see my fate, and I do believe in fate to some degree. So, here's a salute to my great friend Brench on his 1 year since he departed and left us, which is just unbelievable. But I hope that you can spare a little prayer and a thought or whatever meditation for Brenchcore. He was a top bloke. He was loved by many, many people, and I will show that with a podcast in a few months' time when I've got lots of people recorded down saying nice stuff about him. So we could all learn from his example of pushing veganism, pushing for animal rights through his protesting, pushing for animal liberation through his direct action, of which he did a lot, his hunt sabbing, the fact he dedicated his whole life to the ethics of animal liberation in essence. And he always cared for any animals that came and need rescuing and whatever else as well. So we could all learn a thing or two from Brench. So God bless him. Always in my heart. And in the meantime, I hope that you can take some inspiration from an example of a great warrior, and that we need to continue his work, and that I hope I've got the idea of the life and death situation across you, how urgent this is. Yes, it's nice to have a cosy life while we're here. It's nice to daydream that things go on forever and have romantic ideas about stuff. But animal liberation isn't going to happen by itself. It's not going to happen because we're right. It's not morally part of how the world works that because it's morally right it will come into place. I happen to believe that there's an essence to that, but that essence is only anything if we act on it. And Brench was good at acting on stuff, and I hope that you can follow some of his examples. In the meantime, take care.